The ETF Inspector. It's Wednesday, June 11th. Wednesday, you know what that means, Declaration Day. So it's Group A as well as all of the weeklies. This video is going to be specifically for YieldMax's two weekly funds, ULTI, the Ultra Option Income Strategy Fund, and LFGY, the Crypto Industry and Tech Portfolio Option Income Fund. Before we get into it, just a reminder, I'm on X. I post things like when YieldMax releases all the declarations first thing in the morning on Wednesdays, as well as I let you know when videos are coming. So ETF_Inspector1 if you're interested with that. This channel is just at ETF_Inspector. We're up to 654 subscribers on a goal of 1,000. So thank you if you're one of those 654, and if not, please consider. We go over every day, every transaction to let you know what your money is doing within the fund, or if you don't have money in the fund, to see how they operate to help you decide if you want to invest in the fund. I wouldn't say I'm telling you to or not to, just providing all the information so you can make your own decision. All right, markets were kind of mixed today. If you saw on the thumbnail, lots of red, some green. So we'll go in and see how that played out. ULTI itself was up $6.26. Their biggest gainer on the day, Oklo, had an explosive day, up almost 30%. So if you've heard me before when we talk about our percentages in and out of the money and what we color green, but then I say nothing's actually safe. So you can see Oklo through the roof. Mission critical Air Force contract is what sent them flying. The biggest loser for ULTI was eToro. That's one of the new ones. Just started with eToro Group, lost nearly 6%. And then as far as LFGY, they were down 0.25% to $40.32. Still holding over 40. That's nice. Their biggest winner was NU Holdings, up 6.6%, and their biggest loser was GameStop. There's a duplicate. That one's in both funds, so it sits up here. Lost 5.3%. All right, so we'll get a closer look to see exactly what happened. But right before we do, let's talk about the distribution declarations. So we'll talk about the weeklies first. LFGY being one of the ones we cover, it was the highest paying weekly, dollar amount wise, maybe not necessarily percentage wise, but 47.24 cents, followed by Chippy, 40.31 cents, GPTY, 30.7 cents, and then you have your three zero DTE funds, so they get in and out of trades within the day. So R is on the Russell, Q is on the NASDAQ, and S is on the S&P. They paid out 30.38 cents, 25.72 cents, and 22.58 cents, respectively. YieldMax actually beat YMAG, so they, a lower priced fund, but they paying out more, 18.03 cents. YMAG is just the Mag 7, where YMax is all of the individual funds. YMAG paid 17.09. And ULTI, the other one we're talking about, 9.5 cents again. So we've got their closing prices here, annual yields here. I don't want to sit and read every single one of them to you, so you can pause the video if you want to see them. But we will call ULTI the winner there, as they're paying a 78, almost 79% annual yield out of the weeklies. As far as Group A is concerned, I don't cover any of these except GUI. That covers Alphabet's Google. So we'll put them in the front of the line just because. They paid 39.78 cents, or nearly 41% annually. Back to the top, they're just in order from greatest to least. Snoy paid a little over 127. Feet, FEAT, 112 and change. 5e, 106 and change. TSMY, 89 cents, 89.5 cents. Tesla, a little over 40 cents. OARC, about 39.5 cents. YBIT, a little over 33 cents. Crash, I think that's the inverse of Tesla, 25 cents. And speaking of crash, they seem like they're crashing with their fund price, $4.80. And XOMO, 24, nearly 25 cents. Let's see real quick. Looks like Snowy wins this one with a 94.93% annual yield. All right, let's get into the trades. We'll start with ULTI, and it looks like I forgot to make everything bigger. I did. Running real late tonight with practices and things like that, getting home late from work. So I didn't get a chance to fill in this column of strike prices. I just carry it over from here just to make it easier to talk. But so we'll just get through it as is. I won't even have to mention it really. So APLD closed out their, I want to say their 1350s and 14s, 7,000 contracts between the two of them, paying pennies to close them, so that's nice. Actually making money selling to close the puts on them as well, even better as far as options income is concerned. And they went ahead and rolled. I didn't change these either. I'm not going to sit here and do all of that in front of you. So they rolled to next week and picked 13 and 1350. Overall win, they profited $387,000 on their trades today. APP, App Lovin', I'll try and do this while I talk. Closed out their, I think that's 410 and 350s, and changed them to 400 and 335s. I'm not sure why, because they're paying $1 and change, nearly $2. Oh no, that's why, right? Because they're actually getting more selling the insurance policy than they had to pay to close out the other one, and then they went ahead and collected $9 a share. So yeah, that's a good one. Making almost $200,000 profit. GameStop, all they did was adjusted their sold call. Right, they were able to close the 33 out for 9 cents, and they made it a $30.50 for 19 cents. So they're still just trying to make a little bit of extra money throughout the week, still within the same week. $45,000 profit in trading. Oklo, they had to close this one out. It exploded 30%. So paid a pretty penny to close them out, and went ahead and sold next week's. Obviously at a loss, a big loss, $2.48 million loss. But as usual with these, if the stock explodes, although it hurts on the options, it makes out better on the holdings. So I'll show you real quick. They lost about $2.5 million as far as that was concerned, but the value increased off of that explosive day by $4.6 million. So as much as it hurts, it's not the end of the world. Oracle, this one must have had an up day as well, right? They closed their 177.50s and opened 190s, so they had to push their price up decent amount, right? $12.50, and they lost $253,000 in the process. So kept it within the same week though, so they're trying to scratch and claw and make something out of it. Palantir, they closed their 130s and the 103 protective puts to go with them, and opened 138s for next week. Again, taking a loss, $159,000 on that one. Rigetti closed their 1250s and their puts to go with them, and opened $15 ones for next week, losing $395,000 on the trade. Tesla closed their 320s and the puts, and opened 350s for next week, losing nearly $10 per share, or $478,000. And finally, I'm happy to see this one. We've been losing on UNH the whole time, so they closed it out. We're not trading them anymore. So loss of $70,000. So lots of losses, totaled up to 3.2 million in losses today. But I probably should have started with this, right? So we said declaration day came out. It was 9.5 cents exactly. So I had guessed 9 cents. I was off by 5.26%. Still surprising, right? Because based off of the money they made, they lost money. So then based off of the IV, what they try to pay to keep us happy and keep us in the fund would have been high 8 cents, 8 and change. So I rounded up to 9, thinking they were going to try and keep with 9, and they actually paid 9.5. Now we did see, I think yesterday we talked about this. If I unhide it, they sold a bunch of shares. We got tons of trades in this. Maybe not. I must be thinking about LFGY. Okay, so they took a loss and they paid us 9.5 cents anyway. So, all right, let's see how the stocks within the fund did. Start at the top. Again, orange, under construction. Thanks again to Earth Creature for the suggestion. So I won't talk about the options if there's orange next to it because we just talked about the trades. They just traded them out and swapped them for something else, and so we won't have the new data until tomorrow morning's download comes out. So Applied Digital lost 3.5% almost to 1205. It was a decrease of 300,000. They swapped out the options to try and make more money. App Lovin', same thing, only down 0.05%, so basically unchanged. So that was a little bit confusing as why they decided to pay so much to close it out, but they still made a profit. On the trades, it went down to 383.43 and a $5,000 decrease in value. AST Space Mobile was up 2.13% to 36.47. Their calls are still 4.2% out of the money with 2 trading days left in the week. $360,000 increase. Coinbase lost 1.67% down to 250.68. That helped take these calls a little bit further out of the money, 3.7%, and it dropped the value of the fund by 195,000. CoreWeave lost 3.36% today, down to 149.70. Their calls are now 6.8 and 13.5% out of the money, evenly spaced, 600 contracts at each, $624,000 decrease in value. eToro, big loser of the day, almost 6% or 400,000 even. 62.96 was the closing price, and they are down to 19% out of the money. We didn't talk about them as far as I left all that open. We didn't talk about them as far as trades, I don't think, which is surprising at 19% out of the money. No, they didn't do it. Okay, let me never mind. Let's keep it moving. First Solar up 1.97% to 167.86. They're still 4.25% out of the money, and it was an increase of 145,000. FTAI Aviation lost 0.64% to 120.35. Their calls are still 3.86% out of the money. It was a decrease of 70,000 in value. GameStop, another bigger loser, 5.3% down, 720,000 of value. Went down to 28.55, and they swapped out these calls for something closer. They went ahead and kept their puts at the same price. HIMS had a good day, up 4.18%, $750,000, $57.56. Fortunately, we were pretty far out of the money, so even with that big increase, still out of the money, but the price of these most likely went up now, and we're going to need it to stay flat through Thursday, Friday to be able to close these out in our favor. 0.76 and 4.2% out of the money, but the ones closer to the money, we have about 2.5 times as many contracts there at 58. Robinhood up 3.27% to 74.88. Again, keeping their calls just slightly out of the money, 0.16%. and 1.5%. And again, similarly, this time about 4 times as many contracts at the closer to the money price of 75. $639,000 increase in value. IonQ, I tried to sell a put on these guys today. If you watch any of my regular trading, I like trading them a lot. Down 0.1%, 39.70, 15,000 in value lost or decreased. They have the majority of their calls sold at 41. That's 3.2% out of the money, and they also have some at 43. Those are 8.3% out of the money. LabU is the first triple leverage fund we come to. They lost 3.29%, went down to $60.58. That helped get them a little bit further away from the money. Now they're 5.65% out of the money. That's in our favor. And a $339,000 decrease. Mara Holdings lost 0.85% to $16.85. So those were practically right at the money. They bought us a little bit of breathing room there. $105,000 decrease. MicroStrategy down 1%, 387.11. We needed that because they were in the money. They're now out of the money. That's going to help with this $9 premium to close. So that will drop nicely in the next day or two. $154,000 loss of value. NVIDIA down about 0.75% to 142.83. Calls are still 1.5% out of the money at 145 and $145,000 decrease. Oklo, this was the big winner of the day, although it hurts when you're with your options. It brought the whole fund up overall. So $4.6 million increase by going up 29.5% to 28.03. Obviously, they had to swap out those options. Oracle, these were right at the money again, as you can see, because the 6.2 or 0.62% decrease took them to 0.63% away from the money. So it was decreased the value by 55,000. 176.38 was the closing price, and I'm not real sure why they decided to swap them out when they did, but I think I had heard that maybe they were up bigger during the day, so maybe they thought they were going against us and they wanted to just take the hit. But Palantir up 2.7% to 136.39, $472,000 increase. The 130s that were almost 5% in the money are the ones they closed out, and they left open the 137s. They're still almost 0.5% out of the money. Reddit lost 1.75% to 115.03. They're still, I want to say safely, 6.9 and 8.6% out of the money, but as we saw, nothing's safe. $329,000 decrease. Rigetti quietly having a big day, 11.39% increase to $12.52. That was a 1.2, almost $1.3 million increase, but that took us from being double digits out of the money all the way to in the money. So they went ahead. So I put this over here. What they did was half of them. So there's 10,000 contracts were at $12.50. They closed half of them, or 5,000, and sold at a higher price. They left the other half alone. So it wasn't really a full swap out. That's why I threw it over there. RH lost about 5.5% to 178.98, taking their calls 11.7 and 17.3% out of the money and decreasing the value by a little over $750,000. SMCI up 0.7 to 43.21. Calls are still 1.8% out of the money, and it brought the value up by $81,000. Tempest AI up 2% to $70.78. So they were already in the money. They went further in the money. I'm not sure. Hopefully, I guess they're hoping we got a down day coming. But increased the value by 224,000. But as it was sitting at the start of the day, it was going to cost $600,000 to close those out, and then it went up 2%. So, and that's not a 1-to-1. If the stock goes up 2%, that doesn't mean your option goes up 2%. They're usually magnified. TNA, that's our next triple leverage fund, down 1.25% to 32.70. That helped. They were in the money, so sometimes they look like they know what they're doing. When things go in the money, they don't close them out, and the next day they drop back out of the money. So about 0.9% out of the money now. So these will be well under $1 because they were $1 when it started the day in the money. So another day ticked by, time decay, and a 1% decrease. So those are getting cheaper. $164,000 decrease in value. TQQQ, the final triple leverage fund, lost a little over 1% to 75.20. Again, they were practically right at the money, and now they bought a little bit of breathing room. 1.06% out of the money, or 80 cents. $191,000 decrease. Tesla up a fraction to 326.43. They went ahead and closed out the calls that were in the money, the 460 contracts, but they left the 337.50s that are still 3.3% out of the money. We already talked about it. UNH went ahead and closed out, and this was actually the first day that went in their favor. So the puts, they do a put spread on them where everything else they're selling calls, but up to 310 took them out of the money. I just wonder when they made that trade, if it was in their favor at the time of the trade or not. Upstart up 0.35% to 57.88. They've got calls at 58 and 60 that are 0.2 and 3.6% out of the money. It was a $64,000 increase. Vertiv Holdings up nearly 2% to 110.59. Their calls are still 3% out of the money. It was a $152,000 increase. And now that I said it the other day, I want to watch it because I don't think I've seen a day where these two do something different. If they either both go up or they both go down. So Vistra Corp up 1.3% to 166.79. Calls are still 6.4% out of the money. Overall on the day, the value of the funds increased by almost $4 million on the trading day. Since yesterday, there were 1.75 million shares added, bringing our outstanding shares up over 69 million now. The net assets and the NAV won't be current or up to date until tomorrow's holdings download comes out. So I think we said ULTI closed at 626. So, I mean, they paid us the dividend we want, but we'll see at what cost, because they lost money to do it. So, okay, that's it for ULTI. Now we'll switch over to LFGY. I think we already talked about, the biggest winner and biggest loser. So let's go to the trades. They treat things a little different. We'll back things up though. We'll start with this. So based on income, they lost money last week, so we weren't going to get money based on income. But the IV tells us that we're going to get around 45.35 cents. I said since they lost money, but they want to keep paying around the same thing. My guess was 45. And again, they paid us even more than they promised, even though they lost money. So we'll see how long they can afford to keep doing that. But my guess was off by 4.74%. All right, their trades are a little different, right? For the most part, they are not. They're not really closing and rolling things throughout the week. They're just kind of playing, buying and selling portions, with the exception of MBTX. They went ahead, and this will really confuse you when I get down there to talk about that. But so they sold a bunch of shares. They didn't sell out of anything. They just sold chunks of shares. You can see we're in the 70,000s the low, 478,000s the high. So tens to 523. So tens to hundreds of thousands of each stock. So they came up with 4.4 million. I don't know if they're just doing that to free up cash to pay out the distribution or what their reasoning is. But then when we get down into the actual trades themselves, again, like I said, so they're not closing anything out completely. We're not going to go line by line because, as you can see, some of these trades are as low as $192, $54, $48. So no point in reading all them out. So I'll just give you the total of trading, and it was a loss. $4.1 million loss. Now, the part that makes that confusing is this MBTX trade. So let's look at. So it's 150 and 230. I just don't understand it. It's just not making sense. So maybe I'm just been staring at the screen too long. Actually, maybe I'll make it to where you guys can stare at the screen, see what I'm talking about. So MBTX, they closed these 260s. They closed out their well, no, because it's just 16. It's just 16 contracts there. So 2,600 contracts where they sold 150 puts and they bought 230 puts. So basically, they opened a debit put spread to the point that they think MBTX has a big drop coming. They're betting $4 million that it's got a big drop coming. So that's what it is. All right. Sorry it took me so long to figure that out. Yeah, they bought a 230 and sold a 150, and they're betting that the stock is going to drop, and they're going to make money that way. So I sure hope so, because that basically cost them the whole loss today. $4.1 million loss, and you can see that transaction right there is basically that. So everything else really didn't matter. So stay tuned to see if that play worked out. That's the only put spread we have going, and that's the only debit spread we've even seen in either of the funds. So, but they're the professionals, so who are we to question them? We'll just hand them our money and wait for our distributions. So, okay. Bitdeer Technology Group lost 3.3%, down to 1383, bringing their calls a little further out of the money, give us some breathing room at 4.84%, and it was a $164,000 decrease. Clean Spark lost a little over 1.5%, falling just below 10. Their 1050 calls are now 5.3% out of the money, $91,000 decrease. Coinbase lost 1.67 to 250.68. Their calls are 5.7% out of the money. It was a $266,000 decrease. Core Scientific lost over 4% to 12.25. That helped take these calls deeper out of the money. I don't know if you'd still call it deeper. I know you'd say deeper in the money, but 6.12% out of the money now. $306,000 decrease. Seems like a lot more decreasing over here. Galaxy Digital lost 3.35% to 1933. They're now almost 30% out of the money. I assume we're going to see them swap them out tomorrow. $71,000 decrease. GameStop lost 5.3% to 28.55. Yeah, these were the biggest loser over here on LFGY. 17.3% out of the money. $293,000 decrease. Robinhood gained 3.27% to 74.88, but luckily they were over 7% out of the money, so they're still 4.1% out of the money. $245,000 increase. Hut 8 Corp lost a fraction to 18.52, still practically 8% out of the money. $3,000 decrease. iBit, the iShares Bitcoin Trust, they don't trade options on it, so they just do the shares. Lost 0.72% to 61.84. It was a $92,000 decrease, followed by a $91,000 decrease from Mara after they dropped 0.85% to 16.35. Their calls are still 3.98% out of the money. MBTX, this is not the one we just talked about. I mean, it's the same fund, MBTX, but this is a call spread that they have, a credit call spread. So they're still 0.94% out of the money. So this one's sitting in their favor, but by less than 1% at 257.58. So tomorrow you'll see the updated, and there'll be that debit put spread as well. Mercado Libre, they seemed like a big loss, right? They were sitting 2,600 a week ago. Now we're talking about 23.87 was what they dropped to. 3.27% out of the money, $22,000 decrease. MicroStrategy lost a little over 1% to 387.11. They've got practically even sets of calls at 395 and 397.50. They're 2 and 2.6% out of the money. It was a $150,000 decrease. NU Holdings was the big winner over here, 6.6% increase. That took all their calls into the money. 12.76 was the closing price. They're now 2.0 and 5.9% in the money on these. $320,000 increase, but surprisingly, they did not close them out. I think those are for next week. That's the reason they're positioned down the way they are. Actually, I'll be able to tell you. Yep, those two are for next week. The top two are for this week. NVIDIA lost 0.78% to 142.83. Their calls are still 2.2% out of the money, and they decreased by 27,000 value. Opera up 0.69% to 19.10. Still 4.7% out of the money and a $37,000 increase. PayPal Holdings lost 0.2% to 74.61. That was a $7,000 decrease, and they are just 0.5% out of the money. So can't afford for them to go up the rest of the week. Riot Platforms up nearly 1% to 10.55. Still 4.27% out of the money with those $11 calls. It was a $61,000 increase. Tesla, again, up 0.1%, 326.43. 3.39% out of the money with those 337.50s. $6,000 increase. And finally, Block lost 0.65% to 64.06. They've got calls at $66 and $67. The 66 is almost insignificant. It's the 67's got 481 contracts. They're 3 and 4.5% out of the money. So overall, all the ups and downs totaled to a $938,000 decrease in the value of the fund today. There was an increase, people buying into the fund yesterday that shows up today. 50,000 shares, bringing us up to 3.3 million. There's roughly 133 million being managed in the fund. And that's about all we've got to say about that. So we got the dad joke of the day. I meant to look up a better one because this one's pretty bad, and I think anybody that's ever heard of dad jokes heard it, but I forgot to look it up before I started it, and now I'm just ready to end the video. So before we do, thanks for watching. If you made it this far, please like, subscribe, do all the things. Help me out. I appreciate it, and let's just keep going. All right, dad joke of the day. What do you call cheese that isn't yours? Everybody's behind their computer already answering. Nacho cheese. Okay, good night. Hope you have a good trading day tomorrow. And next we talk will be X date. So today was the last chance to buy the stocks. Don't buy tomorrow thinking that you're going to get the dividend. You will not qualify for the dividend if you purchase on X date. So, all right, talk to you tomorrow.